tips. Anything else? Because
Actually, I've got a question for you, because you were like a judge on awards.com, so you must have seen a lot of portfolio websites. What were the ones that usually stuck out for you?
yeah, so for portfolio websites, it was always like the first thing we looked at was this is like a little bit. So like right off the bat, all of the ones were like they're incredibly visually appealing, right? So like the bar is very high. So a lot of it was being a little like nitpicking, to be honest. So one of them would be like, did the site load in a reasonable amount of time? How did it look on mobile? The other thing that I really liked is not just the visuals, but a brief description of the process and the justification for like how they came up with the design. Because sometimes when you just put out like the end product, it's not as helpful as like the journey to get there. So like I'm like a little bit, I liked seeing like there was a storyline for like what was the problem they were trying to solve, like what was the design process, and then it was like what did they actually end up shipping, and then what were the results. So it was this like really well bundled story with these like incredible visuals. Like I won't, every single one that I looked at from awards, like the portfolios and the visuals were just like top notch. Like these are some of the best, you know, visual designers that I've ever seen. So it's the small things. It's the storytelling piece. It's the, you know, does it look good across different devices? Is it load fast? Like these are things that can kind of help differentiate you, because a lot of designers have these beautiful portfolios and then they have like 10 megabyte images and it's like and then like, you know, it takes the page forever to load. To me, that's just like, you know, you might be a great visual designer, but maybe you don't understand like the relationship between your design and like the front end, and how it'll actually perform once it's like a live design.
Yeah, no, that's true. I suppose the thing is, so not necessarily to argue against that, is when I've seen some UX portfolios, I get exhausted by the same sort of thing where you see there's a photograph of sticky notes, there's a photograph of like you know, the design sprint, like double diamond, and sometimes I think, are you just putting it here because you're trying to check a box, or
that's a fair point.
But then it's like, but then what are you supposed to do? Like, there are folks who want to see, like, people don't have the context of your project, so the more you put there, the better. I mean, I think it might be worth having a too long don't read at the top. Like, here's the outcome. This is what we did, and here was the result, and then you lead into the actual story. And so that if someone wants to see, okay, right, they've designed something for, I don't know, Facebook, and this is how they did it. But then if they want to really go into much more detail, it's like, okay, right, how do they get to the steps? Because it's almost like, you know, in films, you start at the end and then work your way back to see how the character got to that position. Right. But then I don't know, it's like everyone's got their own remix and telling their story their own personal way, I suppose.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great kind of like summary. Cool. So let's just quickly transition over to just like interview tips. Again, this will vary a lot depending on the role. So two things just to kind of kick off the conversation that I always recommend is like being prepared as much as possible, doing that pre-work and knowing like the company to the best of your ability. Like really having a good idea of like what the company does, what's their mission, what's their audience, like what's their differentiating like value prop of what makes them different. Those things will all help you. So I'm a big fan of just like being super prepared. And then under preparedness, like this pre-interview process, there's companies like Glassdoor, which have like a list of like company questions that are pretty accurate. And even if they're not, they're just like good to get your brain thinking about like what potential questions you could be asked. And having a framework in your head when you go through these questions is also like super helpful. So yeah, those are just two for like the pre-interview process.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Design Huddle. The opinions expressed are solely our own and do not express the views or opinions of our employer.